Before you ask me anything else, Charlene, let me ask you something. That line didn't come from a president. Not a celebrity, a judge, or a general. It came from a woman sitting on a morning talk show couch, legs crossed, hands folded, spine straight like truth itself. Across from her, the host blinked. Once, twice. Her mouth opened, then paused. There it was. That rare moment on live television when the script slips and something real breaks through. The room didn't breathe. Not the audience. Not the crew behind the cameras. Not even the host, who moments ago was riding the rhythm of her own clever questions. But this guest wasn't there to play along. She was there to burn down the playbook and build something better. Thank you for being here. Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. Her name was Naomi Carter. At 33, she had already done what most people only dared to dream. She didn't just build a business, she built a legacy. Born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, Naomi knew what it meant to make something out of nothing. Her mother worked double shifts at the laundromat. Her father, he was more memory than man, gone before she turned 6. Naomi sold handmade bracelets at local farmers markets when she was 14. By 18, she was running an Etsy shop from her second-hand laptop. By 25, she had 4 employees and a warehouse the size of a one-car garage. And by 30, she was on Forbes' list of founders under 40 to watch. But that's not what made her different. What made Naomi Carter stand out, what made people lean in when she spoke, was how she used her power. Instead of hoarding success, she handed it out like seeds. And her biggest project yet, a nonprofit called Thrive Foundry, dedicated to helping Black women launch their own businesses, business plans, mentorship, microgrants, marketing support. It was a blueprint, a ladder, a mirror. And for the young women she mentored, it was the first time they saw themselves at the top. So when Naomi received an invitation to appear on the Morning Forum, one of the most watched talk shows in the country, it felt like validation. She thought it would be an opportunity. She thought it would amplify her mission. She thought it would open more doors for the women waiting behind her. She didn't know the host had something else in mind. The studio, Los Angeles. Sunlight poured through the tall, tinted windows of the studio as Naomi stepped out of the rideshare. Her suit, a vibrant shade of sapphire, caught the light like a gem. Her heels clicked against the polished floors. Her face was calm, even as her heart pounded with a quiet nervousness. Inside, a makeup artist touched up her cheekbones and said, "Girl, that blue, that's a power move." Naomi smiled. She took her place behind the curtain. The red light blinked on. The host's voice rang out. "Welcome back to the Morning Forum. I'm your host, Charlene Wyatt. Today's guest is a self-made entrepreneur, a woman who claims she's rewriting the rules of business and equity. Please welcome Naomi Carter." The applause came, polite, almost too polite. Naomi walked out under the hot lights, offering a warm wave, her smile steady. She shook Charlene's hand, sat down, crossed her legs, and waited. The first few questions were simple. Charlene asked about Naomi's childhood, her rise from nothing, her incredible journey to the top. Naomi answered smoothly, recounting her roots, her resilience, and the people who helped her along the way. For the first 7 minutes, it felt like exactly what she'd hoped for. But then, Charlene tilted her head. That look, anyone familiar with Charlene Wyatt's interviews recognized it. It was the look she gave when she was about to slide the knife in, politely. "So, Naomi," Charlene said, her voice bright but loaded, "your nonprofit focuses specifically on young Black women. Some might say that's a bit narrow, don't you think?" Naomi's spine didn't move, her smile didn't fade, but her eyes sharpened. "I believe focus is how you get results," she said calmly. "When you see a gap, you fill it. That's what Thrive Foundry does." Charlene chuckled. It was a sound too clean to be kind. "Well, sure. But aren't we at a point where we should be focused on unity, on what brings us together, rather than what separates us?" There it was. Naomi had heard this before. At church, in boardrooms, even during holiday dinners with distant cousins who thought they were being helpful. But this time, it was different. Because this time, the lights were rolling, the cameras were on, and millions of people were watching. Charlene leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping the glossed armrest. She smiled, but the corners of her mouth didn't move much. That kind of smile measured, precise, the kind meant for battle, not warmth. "So Naomi," she said sweetly, "are you saying young black women can't succeed unless someone holds their hand?" There it was. The first real jab. The audience shifted. A few people in the front row glanced at each other. One woman in the third row uncrossed her legs, lips pressed tight. Naomi didn't blink. "No," she said simply. "I'm saying we all need doors, and some of us were never even shown where the hallway begins." That earned a few claps. Hesitant. But they were there. Charlene nodded, eyes glinting. "But the American dream," she pushed on, "isn't that about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? Haven't millions done just that? Why focus on what holds people back instead of what drives them forward?" Naomi inhaled once, then leaned slightly forward. "The American dream," she said softly, "assumes we all start with boots." She paused. "But what if your boots don't have laces? Or worse, what if they were stolen before you ever got a chance to wear them?" Now the crowd reacted. Louder applause. A few gasps. Charlene's smile twitched. Naomi didn't stop. "That's what Thrive Foundry does. We don't wear the boots for them. We give them the laces, the tools, the space. That first step is theirs to take. We just make sure it's possible." Charlene crossed her legs tighter. "Well," she said, her tone hardening just slightly, "that's a clever analogy. But don't you think focusing on race creates more division than unity?" There it was again. The frame. The accusation. Naomi's voice didn't rise. "Unity sounds beautiful," she said. "But you can't build a bridge without acknowledging the river you're crossing." Another pause. "You can't pretend the gap isn't there and still expect everyone to reach the other side." The audience nodded, the applause warmer now. Even a few crew members behind the cameras were exchanging glances. But Charlene wasn't done. "Let's talk specifics," she said. "Your program is only for young black women. Isn't that exclusionary?" Naomi smiled, not wide, not defensive, just assured. "It's intentional," she said. "When you know where the wound is, you apply the bandage there. You don't patch up the whole body and hope for the best." More claps. Louder this time. "And when you lift up those who've been held down the longest," she added, "you raise the floor for everyone else too." Charlene pressed forward. "Well, some say programs like yours encourage dependency. People should stand on their own, not wait for help." Naomi didn't move. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. She tilted her head, just slightly. "Let me ask you something," she said. The room hushed. "When a bank gives out a loan, is that promoting dependency, or is it providing opportunity?" Charlene opened her mouth, but Naomi kept going. "That's what we're doing. We're investing. Not handing out. Not holding up. Investing in potential that's been overlooked and underestimated for too long." Now the audience was with her. Fully. Clapping, cheering. A few even standing. Charlene's lips thinned. She glanced toward the camera director. Then straightened. "Well, Naomi," she said, voice syrupy again. "We're living in a time when everyone wants to feel included. Don't you worry that by narrowing your focus, you leave others behind?" Naomi leaned forward. Her voice was lower now, steady, intentional. "If a child is struggling in school," she said, "you don't hold back the whole class so everyone feels the same. You help that child, you give them what they need. And when they catch up," she added, "the whole class benefits." The claps turned to cheers. Naomi paused. Taking a sip of water, she let the energy settle, then spoke again. "The truth is," she said, "these conversations about fairness, they're rarely about fairness. They're about comfort." She looked directly at Charlene. "Whose comfort are we protecting? And whose discomfort are we willing to ignore?" The room was silent. Charlene's expression flickered. That flicker, the first crack in the polished armor. She tried one last time. But some would say, focusing so much on race is just another kind of segregation. Isn't that ironic? The air changed. Even the camera operator shifted. Naomi looked around the room, then back at Charlene. What's ironic, she said slowly, is how often equity gets twisted into something ugly. She folded her hands. Segregation was about closing doors, about denying access. What I'm doing is the opposite. I'm opening doors that were sealed shut for generations. She paused. And the real irony is that when people like me start fixing the damage, we're the ones accused of causing division. The room erupted. Applause thundered. The crowd rose to its feet. Charlene sat back, her face still composed, but her hands were clenched. Charlene Wyatt sat taller in her chair. Her voice was smooth again, but something had changed. Beneath the practiced cadence was a flicker of tension, a crack in her composure, so faint only the careful observer would notice. She wasn't used to losing control of the room. But right now, it wasn't hers, it was Naomi's, and Charlene knew it. Still, she tried again.
Well, Naomi,
She said, her tone dipped in polished skepticism. You clearly have an answer for everything. She let that hang for a moment. The audience didn't laugh. But let's be real. Charlene continued, there are people out there, hardworking, struggling people, who might look at your program and ask, what about us? She leaned forward. How do you justify leaving them behind? The words hit like a cold slap. Intentional, calculated. Naomi blinked once. Her jaw tensed, just enough to be seen. Then she exhaled and sat back. Her next words were soft. Too soft. So the room had to lean in. Charlene, let me ask you something. Even Charlene blinked at that. When a firefighter rushes to put out a burning house, do we accuse them of ignoring the houses that aren't on fire? Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The silence that followed said more than applause ever could. Naomi let it sit, then continued. What we're doing with Thrive Foundry isn't about ignoring anyone. It's about tending to the flames, before they spread, before more damage is done. The audience was locked in. Even the studio crew had frozen. One stagehand behind the curtain stopped rolling up a cable mid-motion. Naomi wasn't finished. This isn't charity. It's not favoritism. It's not exclusion. She leaned forward again. It's rescue. And when we lift up those who've been most overlooked, when we give them a chance to rise, it doesn't take away from anyone else. It adds to all of us. She paused. And I think we know that. Deep down, Charlene's face had tightened. She reached for her water, took a sip, laughed, thinly. Well, she said, her voice now clearly strained, you're certainly passionate, and I can see why your program has so many supporters. She tried to steer. But let me ask you one last thing. Naomi raised a hand. Not rudely, not with force, but with finality. Before you ask me anything else, Charlene, she said, let me ask you something. The tension in the room rippled. Even the cameraman leaned toward his monitor. Naomi's voice lowered, yet carried further. When people talk about pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, do they ever stop to ask who made the boots in the first place? Or who decided which boots were worth investing in and which ones weren't? The room exhaled. Or maybe it didn't, because for a few long seconds, no one moved. Not Charlene, not the audience, not even Naomi. Her words echoed like footsteps in an empty church. And Charlene Wyatt, the woman known for never missing a beat, sat there, silent. The camera zoomed in on her face. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Naomi sat with her hands calmly folded, grace under fire, dignity shaped like stillness. The host finally cleared her throat, managing a brittle smile. Well, Naomi, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on a few things, she said. Her voice sounded small now, not in volume. In weight, Naomi nodded. I appreciate the opportunity to share my perspective, she replied. Polite, firm, unmoved. The producers cut to commercial, but the room didn't stop buzzing. The audience wasn't just applauding, they were cheering. And they weren't cheering for something. They were cheering because of something. Something they had seen and felt. Something honest. Backstage, Naomi sat in her dressing room, the noise still echoing in her chest. Her phone had already begun buzzing. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of messages. Text bubbles from friends, mentions on Instagram, tags from strangers on TikTok and Twitter. But Naomi didn't reach for her phone. She just sat there, quiet, breathing, letting the fire settle. Naomi Carter didn't cry that night. Not when she opened her inbox and saw 100 new messages. Not when her assistant burst into the dressing room, holding a tablet, eyes wide. Naomi. CNN just called it the moment of the year. Not even when she saw the tweet. Say it louder. Beyoncé. She smiled at that one. But it wasn't pride in her eyes. It wasn't victory. It was something else, something quieter. The phone call. Later, in her hotel room, Naomi's phone buzzed again. This one was different. It was a FaceTime request from Aliyah, one of the girls in her program, 19. Second-hand phone. Big dreams. Bigger doubts. Naomi swiped to answer. Aliyah's eyes were already wet. "Miss Naomi," she said softly, clutching her phone like it was air. "I watched the interview. I watched you. And I just wanted to say." She stopped. Swallowed. "You made me feel like I can do anything." Naomi didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't cry. She just looked at Aliyah for a long moment, then said, gently, "You don't need me to feel that way. That power. It's already inside you. I just gave you a mirror, a back in Richmond." By noon the next day, Naomi was home. She didn't land to a parade. There were no cameras at the gate. But at the community center, they were waiting. A group of young women, all from Thrive Foundry, stood outside the glass doors. Some held signs, some held hugs, but all of them held something invisible and unmistakable: belief. That night, Naomi stood in front of them. No makeup, no lights, just her voice, the talk that mattered most. "Let me tell you something," Naomi began, standing before her girls. Her tone was even. But the fire, it hadn't gone out. "The world isn't always going to hand you fairness. Sometimes you'll have to demand it." Her eyes moved across the room. Dozens of young faces. Some defiant, some uncertain. "But I need you to remember something." She paused. "Your story, your voice, your worth. None of it is up for debate, ever." A hush fell, the kind of silence that's not empty but full. Full of knowing, full of promise, full of fuel. Online, the fire spreads. The clip of Naomi's final line. "Do you ever stop to ask who made the boots in the first place?" was shared over 12 million times in 3 days. TikTok creators remixed it. Educators quoted it. Churches played it during Sunday sermons. And Thrive Foundry, donations flooded in. But Naomi didn't post about it. She didn't write a statement. Didn't do follow-up interviews. Instead, she got to work. Quiet change. 2 weeks later, Naomi sat in a room with 4 new volunteers. All white, all men, all retired business owners. They had watched the clip. Then they looked up Thrive Foundry. Then they called. "We don't want credit." One of them said, "We want to show up." And they did. They taught Excel. They edited pitch decks. They reviewed loan applications. They brought snacks. They didn't ask for photos. They asked how to listen. And Naomi let them. Not because she needed their help, but because they needed the fire too, not the end. Late one evening, Naomi stood alone in the dark hallway outside her office. One of the girls, young, brilliant, deeply unsure, had just pitched her first product idea. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Naomi leaned against the wall and whispered to herself, "This is the real stage. Not the lights, not the cameras. This." What she taught us. Naomi Carter didn't change the world with a viral moment. She changed it by refusing to make herself small. By refusing to trade truth for comfort. By refusing to water down fire just to keep the room from sweating. And she taught us this: courage is not loud. It's not a performance. It's a decision, made again and again, to speak what needs speaking, even when your voice shakes. Even when your seat is soft and televised. Even when someone across from you smiles with a sharpened tongue. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit there, look them in the eye, and ask the question no one prepared for. Final words. Simone Jackson's name has changed, the setting too, but the story, the truth, remains. She walked into a room designed to shrink her. She left it expanded. And for every young woman watching, unsure whether their fire has a place, now they know. It does. So, what did we witness? We saw what happens when a woman refuses to shrink. We saw how truth spoken plainly can silence even the loudest rooms. And most of all, we saw how one voice can ripple into 1,000 others. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life, if it stirred something that's been quiet too long, take a moment. Think about how you can hold the door open for someone behind you. Not just once, not just online, but truly. And if you feel called, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear them. And if you want more stories like this, quiet, powerful, real, subscribe and tap the bell. You never know when the next spark might come. Until then, keep your fire lit.